fail. You have to put your bitachon in the Rabbeinu Shalom and in the Rabbeinu Shalom only. Okay, now that I got that off my chest, let's go back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Let's begin Siman Shin Samach Ches Im Acher She'ervu Niskalkel Ha'erev. Before we begin, I want to give a little bit of a hakdama. At first glance, Sif Aleph, and that's what we're going to do today, but almost all the Mishnah Berurah today is on Sif Aleph, so we're going to do Sif Aleph today. At first glance, Sif Aleph feels and sounds a little bit complicated. It's really not complicated at all. There's a few basic things that we have to understand in order to very easily understand Sif Aleph. An Eruvei Chatzeros. What does an Eruvei Chatzeros accomplish? We have 21 units sharing one common Chatzer. Everybody needs to join together to become one entity. How do we do that? Either everybody contributes a certain amount of pas or a certain amount of kemach, flour, that's going to be made into a pas. We all join in one pas, in one keli full of pas, in one amount of pas. All of that pas is put into one of the units. Now it's as if we all live together in that unit, or according to some Rishonim, we all live together in all of the units. Now we're one entity. The Chatzer is one entity. Well, the houses are one entity. Now you could carry freely from the houses to the Chatzer, from the Chatzer to the houses, from one house to another. So the Eruv, Kishmai Kenhu, the Eruv combines everybody together into being one entity. You could go around and physically collect pas or kamach from each unit, or one of the Bnei HaChatzer could get up with a box of matzah and say, I'm being mizakeh this pas to everyone. I'm making this pas, right? You hand it off to somebody. Reuben hands it off to Shimon, tells Shimon, the Rav, go ahead and be makabel this box of pas, be makabel this box of matzah, accept it on behalf of everyone. So now it belongs to everyone. We put it into one of the units. Presto, we have it in Eruvei Chatzeros. That's the way an Eruvei Chatzeros works. Now, in Sif Gimel, we're going to see that an Eruvei Chatzeros has to have a minimum shear. When you make the Eruvei Chatzeros, you can't make it out of a crumb. There is a minimum shear. High level, the minimum shear of an Eruvei Chatzeros is mazayin shtei seudos, enough food for 2 meals. And we'll see in Sif Gimel the details of that. How much is that? Do you always need mazayin shtei seudos or not? But high level, an Eruvei Chatzeros has to be made out of a minimum amount of bread. It has to be made out of mazayin shtei seudos. Having said that, the only time the Erev needs that minimum shear is betchilas ha'erev, at the outset of the Erev, at the inception of the Erev. That's when you need the minimum shear. What does that mean? The outset, the beginning, the inception of the Erev? It means that when you make the Erev, and when the Zman of Achlasa Shabbos, when Shabbos comes in, excuse me, when Shabbos comes in on the first Shabbos that Erev is in place, so if you make the Erev for the first time Parshas Vayikra, so then when Shabbos comes in Friday evening, Parshas Vayikra, that's when the Erev begins. That's when it's first Chal. So when you make the Erev, and when it is Chal for the first time at Hachnasa Shabbos on its first Shabbos, it must have the shear. So it has to be mazayin shtei seudos at that time. Now, what happens if you made the Erev out of exactly mazayin shtei seudos, and then Shabbos afternoon, Parshas Vayikra, somebody eats from the Erev, and now it's less than mazayin shtei seudos? That's what we call nismait ha'erev. The Erev dwindled. It became less. Somebody ate from it. Is that a problem? No. Because you only need the minimum share of mazayin shtei seudos at the inception of the Erev. Even on the first Shabbos, you don't need the shear for the entire Shabbos. You need the shear at the Zman of Achnasa Shabbos. When Shabbos begins, you need to have the shear. A minute after Shabbos begins, you don't need the shear anymore. Now, what do you need? You can't gobble up the whole Erev. If you gobble up the whole Erev and the whole Erev is gone, so the first Shabbos you wouldn't have a problem. Because the first Shabbos, since it had a shear at the beginning of Shabbos, Shabbos came in Shehutra. Since the Erev was in place and carrying in the Chotzer was mutter at the beginning of Shabbos, it remains mutter for the entirety of Shabbos. But for next Shabbos, you would have a problem. If it's completely gone. But what if it's not completely gone? What if there's a little bit left? A kol shehu. Aruch HaShulchan says kol shehu means at least a kazayas. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but that's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. The Aruch HaShulchan says kol shehu doesn't really mean kol shehu, it means at least a kazayas. Okay, so what if you made the Erev Shabbos Parshas Vayikra? When Shabbos came in Friday evening, you had Mazid Shtei Sudos. It's a good Erev. Shabbos afternoon, somebody ate from it. By the time Shabbos Parshas Vayikra is over, there's only a Kizayas left. Are you good for Parshas Tzav? Yes, because Tchilas HaErev needs the minimum shear. Shiarei HaErev, remnants of an Erev, do not need the minimum shear. And after that first Shabbos, after the beginning of the first Shabbos, it's called Shiarei Erev. From now on, it's remnants of an Erev. Remnants of an Erev are mutter, even if you only have a kol shehu. So again, Erev Chatzeros, minimum shear, Mazid Shtei Sudos. When do you need the minimum shear? Tchilas HaErev. What's Tchilas HaErev? When you first make the Erev, and when it's Chal at Knisas HaShabbos on its first Shabbos. That's when you need the minimum shear. What happens if after that it's nisma'et? Well, even if it's gone completely, for the first Shabbos, you're okay. If it's gone completely, you're going to need a new Erev for the next Shabbos. But what if it's not gone completely? If you have at least a Kazayas left, according to the Aruch HaShulchan, according to others, a Kol Shehu, even if you have a drop of the Erev is still extant after people ate from it, it's good. It's Shiarei Erev, and for Shiarei Erev, you do not need a shear. Okay, now, the question that we're going to deal with here in Sif Aleph is, they went ahead the week of Parshas Vayikra, and they decided that they want to make it a Erev Chatzeros. So either somebody went around and collected individual contributions to the Erev, or maybe on Erev Shabbos, the Gabbai took a box of matzah, handed it to the Rav, and the Rav was mezaka in the Erev for all the Bnei HaChotzer. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Friday afternoon, they made a good Erev. And it has Mazid Shtei Sudos. But now, Shabbos afternoon for a late lunch, somebody washed, and somebody ate from the Erev. And now the Erev was nisma'et. It became less. When? Before the Erev was ever Chal. The Erev is not Chal until Knisas HaShabbos, when Shabbos comes in Parshas Vayikra. But they ate from the Erev Shabbos Parshas Vayikra. So the Erev was never Chal. And now you don't have Mazid Shtei Sudos. So now you have a problem. Now you can't start this Erev. This Erev is not going to take effect. Because when Shabbos comes in Friday night, you're not going to have the minimum share of Mazid Shtei Sudos. This is Tchilas Erev. You need the minimum share. Baruch Hashem, somebody realized the problem before the Zman of Knisas HaShabbos. Before Shabbos started, Friday evening, somebody realized the problem. He looked at the box of matzahs and he said, uh-oh, somebody had a big lunch, and now we don't have the minimum share for the Erev Chatzeros. And now he wants to go ahead and he wants to replenish the Erev. Now, we know that at least on some level, when you make it a Erev Chatzeros, we understand that the creation of an Erev Chatzeros, at least on some level, requires the das of the people that are being joined by the Erev. Now, we've seen cases where you don't really need everybody's das. One person could be mezaka for everybody. A wife could do it sometimes for a husband, even against the husband's will. But there's sort of a given that on some level, by the wife who's doing it for the husband, it's ishtay kegufay. When you're doing it without the das of the Bnei HaChotzer, it's because zachin la'adam shaloi b'fanav. But this is not something, the chalois of the Erev, the creation of the Erev, is not something that takes effect and is done in a vacuum completely removed from the Bnei HaChotzer. On some level, there has to be involvement of the Bnei HaChotzer. The question over here is now, This individual who discovered the crisis, and he discovered that the Erev does not have the minimum shear, B'tchilas Erev, before it ever takes place for the first time, he wants to remedy the issue, and he wants to replenish the Erev. Does he need the das of the Bnei HaChotzer? That's the question that we're going to deal with here. And there are several variables that we're going to talk about. One variable is, when he goes to replenish the Erev, what is he going to use? Is he going to use the same min? Is he going to use the same type of pas that the Erev was originally made out of? So if the original Erev was made out of wheat matzah, is he going to use wheat matzah? Or he only has spelt matzah. The people in his house are gluten-free, so he only has spelt matzah. Well, if he's using spelt matzah, he's not using the same min. He's using a min acher. So is he using the same min, oisoi min, or is he using a min acher? Why does that matter? So the Rishonim say the reason it matters is because if you're using the same min, it doesn't look, taste, and feel so much that you're making a new Erev. You're not making a new Erev. The Erev was already there, you're replenishing it or whatever it is. You're using a different min, it was wheat, you're using spelt, now it's more that you're making a new Erev from scratch. Okay, that's one variable we're going to speak about. Another variable, what was the case? Was the Erev nisma'et? You had mazon shtei sudas. Now somebody ate from it and it dwindled. So now you only have mazon suda achas. But the Erev is still there. It just was nisma'et mishiuroi. Or, so you're just replenishing the Erev? Or is it kala lagamri? Did somebody have a really big lunch and he ate the whole box of matzah and the Erev is completely gone? Well, in that case, again, it looks and feels much more that you're making a brand new Erev. The Erev was gone. It's kala lagamri. You're making a new Erev. The last variable, when the person who discovered this crisis goes to remedy the situation, where is he getting pas from? Is he going to use his own pas? In other words, he comes, he looks, the pas of the Erev is gone. He runs to his pantry, he grabs a box of matzah, he hands it off to somebody and says bizoicha in it for all the Bnei HaChotzer. So he's using his own pas. Is he using his own pas? Or is he using pas that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer? How does he have pas that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer? Who knows? Maybe it's the Rav and the Gabbai in the shul, and maybe there's a pantry closet in the shul that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer, or maybe it's before Pesach, and they have matzah that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer. So the Gabbai has access to pas that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer. And now he's replenishing the Erev, or he's making a new Erev because the old Erev is completely gone, and he's not using his own pas. He's using pas that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer. Look over here. I have a box of matzah that belongs to unit number 1. I have a box of matzah that belongs to unit number 2. I have a box of matzah that belongs to unit number 3. I'm going to take a little piece from each one. So now I'm replenishing the Erev, or I'm remaking the Erev from pas that belongs to the Bnei HaChotzer. So those are the three variables that really we're going to discuss. Again, is the Erev completely gone? Or was it nismait? If it's only nismait, you're replenishing it. If it's completely gone, you're redoing it. Are you using the same min? It was wheat matzah, you're using wheat matzah. Or it was wheat matzah and using spelt matzah, using min acher. Min acher, again, looks like a brand new Erev. And lastly, whose pas are you using? Are you using your pas? Well, if you're using your pas and you're being mezakined for all the Bnei HaChotzer, then you can understand that you don't really need the das of the Bnei HaChotzer as much. I mean, you're giving them your pas. What do they care, right? Or are you taking pas that belongs to them? If you're taking pas that belongs to them, again, you could understand more that you might need the das of the Bnei HaChotzer. Okay, against that backdrop, I think we could move through Sif Aleph very quickly. Says the Mechaber, Sif Aleph. Ervu, the Bnei HaChotzer made in a Ruvik Hatzeres. Beautiful. V'achakach niskalkel ha'erev, and then the Erev became ruined. What does that mean, it became ruined? Well, at least it was nismait mishiuroi. It had mazon shtei sudas, now it has less. And when did this happen? The Mechaber doesn't spell it out, but the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain to us that it's very clear that this happened before the Erev ever started. It happened betchilas ha'erev. It happened before the Erev ever kicked in on its first Shabbos. That's why we're concerned that it needs to have a shear. If this is already the fourth week of the Erev, we don't need a shear. As long as there's a Kazayas or a Kosher who left, we don't care if there's a shear or not. So this happened before the Erev was ever Chal on its first week. So Ervu, v'achakak niskalkal Erev. Uba echad b'mnei HaChotzer, and now one of the b'nei HaChotzer realizes the crisis, and he comes, lachzor ulasaknoi. Now he wants to go fix the Erev. What does that mean he's going to fix the Erev? Well, if it was nismait mishiyurai, he's going to replenish it. If it's kol lagamri, he's going to make a new Erev. So now, what's the halacha? Says the Machaber. In Baal Arev mimin harishain, if he's going to use the same min as the original Erev, so the original Erev was wheat matzah, and he's going to use wheat matzah. So says the Mechaber, in that case, afilu kala, even if the original Erev is completely gone, ein tzarich la'idiyah, he does not need to be ma'idiyah the b'nei HaChotzer. He doesn't have to make a chain call to the b'nei HaChotzer or send out a WhatsApp blast to the b'nei HaChotzer and tell them, Rabbi Yisai, you should all know that the Erev was nismait mishiyurai and I'm replenishing it. No, he could go do what he has to do. Va'afilu ma'arev aleim mishalohem, and he can even use their pas. So again, the Erev became ruined before it ever kicked in on its first Shabbos. Somebody realized the problem. He could go ahead, if he's using the same min, he's using wheat matzah, and it was wheat matzah, he could go ahead and he could replenish it. If it was completely eaten up, he could go make a brand new Erev with new pas. He could even use their pas, and he doesn't have to be Ma'idiyah anybody. He could just do what he needs to do. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting aleph. Lachzar ulasaknai. First of all, says the Mishnah Berurah, like I spoke out, Zemayri b'Shabbos Rishon. This is talking about the very first Shabbos of this Erev. V'diskalkal kaidim shenichtas haShabbos. And the Erev became diminished before it ever kicked in at the Zman Knisas haShabbos of the first week. The ilon iskalkal achash kvar nichtas haShabbos. Because if the Mechaber was talking about a case where the Erev was nismait, or it got completely destroyed after the Zman of Knisas haShabbos on its first week, ain't tzar shum tikkun l'Shabbosu. So for this Shabbos, for Shabbos Parshas Vayikra, you wouldn't have to do anything. Afilu kfar kol v'nevet legamri. Even if the Erev is completely gone, if it was completely eaten up Friday night, after Shabbos already began, for the first Shabbos you're okay. Because Shabbos gave it hutra. Since the Yeruva Cheseris was okay at the beginning of Shabbos, so then the Hoitzar remains mutter for the entirety of Shabbos. Ule'inyan Shabbos Shnia, and when it comes to the question of next Shabbos, Parshas Tzav, after im kfar kol legamri tzarich la'arev mechadosh, while it's true that if the Erev would have been completely eaten up, if it was kol legamri, you would have to make a new Erev for Parshas Tzav, because the Erev is gone. Halo al kol panim b'nishtayr, but if there's some left, I feel kol shehu, even a minute amount, ain't tzar shum tikkun. You wouldn't need to do anything. Kevan dahayashir erev beben hashmashal Shabbos Rishona. Since at the first Shabbos, Parshas Vayikra, at the inception of the Erev, you had a shear. If you had a shear at the time of the inception of the Erev, you don't need a shear after that. K'moshe issa b'sif daled, like we're going to learn in Sif Daled. And umazet ka'amar b'seif hasif v'imloi kola v'chulei. At the end of Sif Aleph, the Mechaber is going to discuss a case where the Erev was nisma'et. And he's going to say, the Erev was nisma'et, you could go ahead and you could replenish it. And you don't have to tell the people that you're replenishing it. Well, wait a second. If we're talking about Shabbos number 2, if we're talking about it's not Tchilas HaErev, it's Shiarei HaErev, because the Erev was already in place for one Shabbos. So then what do you mean you could replenish it and you don't have to tell the people? You don't have to replenish it. If Parshas Vayikra was the inception of the Erev, and at the Knesset Shabbos of Parshas Vayikra you had a shear, so fine, it's a successful Erev. Parshas Tzav, as long as there's a Kazayas left, you don't have to replenish it. So what are you telling me? You could replenish it and you don't have to tell them. You don't have to replenish it. You don't have to do anything. You have a fine Erev. And that's true even if you're taking their pas. Ella vade kidikosavnu. So it's very clear, says the Mishnah Berurah, like I'm writing over here, that Sif Aleph is talking about a case that the Erev was Nisma'et when? Before Shabbos began of the first Shabbos of the Erev, it was Nisma'et B'tchilas ha'Erev. The Niskalkel Kaidim Shenichnas HaShabbos Rishona. Okay, the Mechaber said, in such a case, right? So you're using, it was Niskalkel before the first Shabbos. Somebody discovered it. He wants to go replenish it, and he's using the same min as the original Erev. Wheat matzah. It was made out of wheat matzah. He's using wheat matzah. What did the Mechaber say? Ein tzarich lahidiyah. You don't have to let them know. You don't have to make a chain call. Lishalom im yisratzu lozeh. You don't have to make a chain call and say, listen, Rabbi Isai, the Erev got ruined before it ever had a chance to go into effect on the first Shabbos. I'm going to go ahead now and replenish it. Are you maskim? Are you maskim to the Erev? Are you all still agreeable to make an Erev? No, you don't have to ask them. The Makmina Chaskase, because you could use Chazaka, the Vada Yisratzu Kula Miminzek, Kamosha Yisratzu Mitchila. Why do you have to ask them anything? They all agreed. We spoke about this, Tuesday. Everybody agreed we're going to make it a Ruvik Hatzeris, right? So what changed? Fine. You made it a Ruvik Hatzeris, some of it got eaten. So you have to replenish it. Why do you have to go ask them again? There's no reason to ask them. So that was all. If you're using the same min, you're using the same type of pas as the original Erev. Now, let's go weiter. Now let's go down to the second line of Siman Shin Samaches, near the end of the line. But, says the Mechaber, v'imbala arev mimin acher. But let's say you're not using the same type of pas that the original Erev was made out of. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Gimel mimin acher, kigon shahaya metchila pas chitim. Originally it was made out of wheat matzah. I'm just picking on matzah because that seems to be the minig, especially since the minig is to make it an Erev Pesach. Va'aksha roitzel arev v'pasa oirim. It was made out of wheat matzah, and now you want to use barley matzah, or you want to use spelt matzah, so you're using a min acher. Oh, says the Mechaber, v'imbal arev min acher. If you're making the Erev out of a different min, and like I told you, the Rishonim say, most notably the Ritva in Erevin, that when you're going to make the Erev or replenish the Erev out of a different min that it was originally made, it looks, smells, and tastes a little bit more like you're not replenishing the Erev, you're making a new Erev, different min, different part of the menu. So it looks more like you're making a new Erev. Therefore, says the Mechaber, V'imbal Arev Mimin Acher, then it gets a little bit more murky. Now we have to look at all three variables that we spoke about. So variable number one, it's min acher. Now that's a problem. That's a reisa. That's a weakness. That's a reason to tell us more that you need the das of the bnei achotzer, because it's a min acher. But how about the other two variables? In bala ariv min acher, so then it depends. Im kala harishain, what was the case? Was the Erev nisma'et? It got diminished, but there's still some of the Erev extant? Or im kala harishain, if it's completely gone, tzarich lo'hidiyah lehem, then you have to let them know that you're making a new Erev im ma'arev mishalahem. If you're using their pas. So again, if you're using a min acher, you're using a different min of pas, that's one reisa. And it's kala legamri, the original Erev is completely gone, that's a second reisa. And you're using their pas, that's a third reisa. Because again, if you're using their pas, it makes more sense that you need their das. In that case, tzarich lo'hidiyah lehem im ma'arev mishalahem. V'im mishaloi, but if you're not using their pas, you discovered the problem, you grab your own box of spelt matzah, and you're going to be mezaka them in your box of spelt matzah. So then, says the Mechaber, ain't tzarich lo'hidiyah klal. Then you don't have to let them know anything. So again, even if it's a different min, and even if the original Erev is kala legamri, it's completely gone, but you're using your own pas. If you're using your own pas, you don't need to tell them anything. Why? You're using your own pas. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and dalet. Tzarich lo'hidiyah lehem. When is this case that tzarich lo'hidiyah lehem? When you have all three variables go bad. You're using a min acher, the original Erev is kala legamri, and you're using their pas. You're being ma'ariv mishalahem. Then tzarich le'yadilahem. What does it mean that you have to let them know? L'shalom. You have to ask them. It's not enough to send out a blast, a group chat. By the way, I'm making a new erev. No, you have to ask them. Do you still want to make an erev? Tzarich l'shalom. Why? Because since the original box of wheat matzah that made the erev is gone, it's as if you're making a brand new erev. And if you look at Oistal in the Sharitzin, you'll see he quotes this from the Ritva. The cost of a and you're using a different min, and it's kol legamri, and you want to use their pas. The cost of a Maimon Mordechai. Now, the Maimon Mordechai takes this down a notch. The Maimon Mordechai says that, look, the Mechaber is telling you over here that when you have all three problematic variables, you got to ask them if they still want to make an erev. The Maimon Mordechai says he cuts down even that position a little bit. And he says, when is that true? The dafka bebayas hapasuach l'shtei chatzeros the lo yodi'inon b'hai nichle. If you remember, we spoke about this in the previous year. This is only true that you have to call them up and ask them if they still want to make an erev if there's another problematic variable. What's that? The house that you're talking about is a house that happens to open up onto two chatzeros. So, since that house opens up onto two chatzeros, you already have a question. Which chatzer does he want to be ma'ariv with? Does he want to be ma'ariv with chatzer A? Does he want to be ma'ariv with chatzer B? Does he want to be ma'ariv with both? So there's another problematic variable. That's when you have to call him up and say, listen, the Erev got ruined completely. The Erev is completely gone. I want to replace a wheat Erev with a spelt Erev. I want to use your pas, and I don't know which chatzer you want to be ma'ariv with. That's when you got to ask. But in the basic case, we have 21 units opening up onto one chatzer. What do you mean? Then even in this case, you don't have to ask him. Because the bottom line is, Mezakin Ladar Shalai B'fanav, and he already agreed to make an erev. So what? Because he changed it from wheat to spelt? I mean, come on. Ve'ein tzarich daitoi. We can't cost through shari achrayim. And that's what the other achrayim say as well. But the Mechaber said, certainly if you're not using their pas, if you're using your pas and you're being mezakeh them your pas, then you don't have to ask them. What do they care if you use spelt or you use oats or you use rice bread? What do they care? They're not making any new contributions. You're being mezakeh them in your pas. On Tuesday, everybody agreed to make it a Ruva Chatzeros. So you don't have to go call them up and ask them if they're still nisratza. Okay, finishes off the sif. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines into the Siman. The imloy kol harishain ela nismayit. And what if you want to replenish the erev using a minacher? So it was wheat. You're using spelt, but it's not kol legamri. The original erev is not gone. It just went down from Mazit Shtei Sudais to Mazit Sudachas. It happened before Tchilas Erev, so you still need a share. But you're not replacing the Erev, you're just replenishing the Erev. Even if you're using their pas, you don't have to let them know. Because over here, what are the variables that are no good? You're using their pas. Okay, that's a bad variable. You're using minacher, you're using spelt instead of wheat. That's a bad variable. But it's not kol legamri. It's only nismayit. The only time you have to go back to the Bnei HaChotzer and ask them if they still want to make an erev is when all three variables are no good. It's kol legamri, it's a minacher, and you want to use their pas. But over here, where it's not kol legamri, it's only nismayit, you have a variable that's okay. So then you don't have to be maidia them, even if you're using their own pas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois katan vav, ella nisma'et, mishir hamufurish lekaman besif gimel. If you need mazin shtei seudais, and you don't have mazin shtei seudais, it went down to mazin seudachas. But he's reminding you that this whole sif is only germane to the case where this happened by Tchilas ha'erev. Because if it's not Tchilas ha'erev, you don't need to share. Ois katan zayin ain't tzarich loidiam the bevadi yisratzu lahashlam ha'erev, because they would certainly want you to replenish the erev. told you that once I gave you the Akdama, it wouldn't be too complex. Okay? We're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discussion of limud HaTorah should be made and God's Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua Sefuras Parnasa Shadukam to Lozinit. We should be Zayich to see the BS Gal Tzedek B'Mher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.